certain elections, I think financial markets, there's a lot of capital on the sidelines. It didn't surprise me that Bitcoin didn't want to move until it got a result. Going into the election, remind you, people didn't know if whoever won or lost, if we were going to actually get a final result, if there was going to be marching and protests and revolting, and if anyone was going to concede to being the loser. I think such a landslide victory and such a decisive win for Trump gave the market a lot of certainty, and it acted on that certainty. That is unquestionable. That's just data. That's just math. Now, whether it's Powell or Putin or Trump or new chairmans, I think the story here is Bitcoin is a good idea. Savings account. Nobody stores their wealth in the US dollar. People use equities, real estate, precious metals, art. These are the assets people have monetized to persist and store their wealth, and Bitcoin is a competitor to that. And I would agree with that. I really, really would. I think Bitcoin is demonetizing these instruments where people are going from owning 10 homes where they only live and consume in one to I might as well just own the one home I actually use and sell my 9 and buy Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin is better at persisting and storing wealth. Bitcoin is outperforming, and your other 9 homes weren't actually intended to be a monetary unit to store value. They were intended for you to live in them. And so I think society has monetized other assets in their life out of desperation to persist and store wealth. And now we've engineered a solution that solves that problem. And what Jerome is saying is, listen, we're still going to have the dollar as a transactional currency in this country. But if people are going to speculate and use Bitcoin to store and persist their wealth as opposed to real estate instead of an index basket of equities, consider that it's free and instant to transfer it anywhere in the world. On top of that, consider it's way cheaper to verify its authenticity. On top of that, consider the fact that it could be divided into such small units that could measure a grain of sand or measure the size of a sports franchise. Right. It is the superior monetary asset and monetary good. The last thing I'll say about gold is this. Listen, the fact that gold has to be concentrated at a central party, like a government, like a bank, like a corporation, to achieve final settlement, to achieve transaction finality, ended up being the reason that gold failed. In order for gold, if we were living in a localized economy with 10 people, gold's perfect. I can go to my local butcher, my local grocer, my local tailor, and I can exchange gold coins. If you want to live in an economy, a global one with 8 billion people on the internet, gold didn't work. Because in order for us to facilitate global digital payments, we had to go give our gold to governments, central banks, and corporations for them to achieve the transaction finality. The we can print. I think that if you look at domestic debt to GDP, if you look at global debt to GDP, whatever metric is your favorite, there's a hole in the balance sheet. There is more borrowed than we've produced growth to pay it back. And the question everyone has to ask is, who's realizing that loss? There's a loss. Someone has to realize it. Which one of us sitting at the table is the loser? And that's what I think everyone's fighting over. That's what policy is about. These are the decisions that are being made at the highest level. And by owning something like Bitcoin, for me, is saying, listen, I don't know what the outcome is going to be. I don't know who they're going to dictate the loser, but it's not going to be me. It's not going to be me. And I can cryptographically and mathematically guarantee you that it's not going to be me. So I'm out. And that's how I think about it. And that's what I think we're living through.
Yeah. I mean, talk to me a little bit about the long-term situation here, because obviously we just saw President Trump talk about BRICS, saying, okay, the U.S. dollar, if any country doesn't want to use the U.S. dollar, they're going to be 100% tariff. But could we, a respected Washington lawyer, Paul Atkins, to lead the SEC or the Securities and Exchange Commission? I mean, he's viewed obviously as far more crypto-friendly than Gary Gensler. And even if it might not affect Bitcoin's core value proposition directly, a friendlier regulatory environment could lower some hurdles for investors and institutions. So how significant is this development? And do you think that it's going to, create some price movement here?
Sure, probably. Again, investors like certainty.
Yeah.
Right. And if the certainty they're getting is that regulation is going to be pro-technology and that you are comfortable either investing in technology, investing in the assets that this technology represents, investors are going to like that. Myself personally, I'm a Bitcoin only guy. For those that don't know, I've been in Bitcoin for 12 years. So I was around before all these alternative cryptos ever existed. I still, to this day, I don't understand the value I don't think they're anything like Bitcoin. I don't think they're money whatsoever. So I don't think they should be compared to Bitcoin. Their relationship with the IMF is better. The way that the outside world assesses their creditworthiness is better. GDP is up. Domestic business is up. I mean, it's transformed that country in more ways than one. So first of all, whenever I get asked the question, when are countries going to start buying Bitcoin, I have to acknowledge El Salvador. They were the first. Other than that, listen, I think the United States and Trump and the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is a huge deal. Now, are other sovereigns and countries front running them? Maybe. It's totally possible. But I think all eyes are on the United States. All eyes are on Donald Trump. And I think the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and the United States buying Bitcoin is such a net positive. It'd be such a big deal. So I think we're going to learn a lot over the next few months. And it would not surprise me if other countries and other sovereigns are front running the United States of America, especially for an asset as scarce as Bitcoin.
Yeah, well, you and I are going to talk about Cynthia Lummis, the Wyoming senator's proposal here in a moment. But before we do, we just got some recent U.S. Jobs data out from November. Payrolls rose by 227.
He would have kept rates high until he hit his goal, but he didn't. And that tells you everything you need to know. He's not in charge. We're living in fiscal dominance. The U.S. Treasury is the most important position in the world. And he's going to continue to cut because the U.S. interest payments, we can't afford them. And so that's the reality of the situation. And I think the world will increasingly try to bail out the United States of America. And the only way to do that is to weaken the dollar and juice assets. Yeah. And so I absolutely do think this path will continue. And if anything, it'll get more aggressive.
Okay. So what are these major risks that you're watching for next year? I mean, specifically, is the market underpricing any of these risks right now?
Yeah, I think it's underpricing Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, I think a lot of the market is under the same impression I am. Have you heard a Larry Fink interview recently?
Which one?
I don't think it matters.
Yeah,
Point being, it's pretty clear. Listen, I think the 60-40, both in the short term, what we've seen over the last few years and over the last century. In other words, the purchasing power of the dollar has done nothing but go down. And the reason for that is because you can print infinite amounts of it. It can be debased, and the assets that you need to buy with it get inflated in price. Now, Bitcoin is quite literally the opposite. In its history, all it's done over time is go up. It cannot be printed. Therefore, it cannot be debased. And in fact, instead of the goods and services that you need to buy going up, it actually goes down in price. So housing price in Bitcoin has gotten cheaper. Groceries in Bitcoin has gotten cheaper. Gas in Bitcoin has gotten cheaper. And so I think Bitcoin as a reserve asset to store your capital is a winner. It's obviously better than fiat currency. And so what I did personally is I asked myself the question, how can I live a life without inflation? If there is a money that only goes down, why do I own any of it? It was really first principle thinking. If the dollar only goes down over time, why do I own any? And if Bitcoin only goes up over time, why don't I own as much?
President-elect Trump's original idea involving the 200,000 seized Bitcoin, Lummis, as you just said, wants to gradually acquire 1 million Bitcoin over 20 years, about 5% of this total supply. So, I mean, is this scenario even feasible? I know that it's seeing some eyeballs right now, but do you see this actually coming to fruition?
Absolutely. I'd ask why not.
Yeah.
Listen, I think the story for the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve to me is this. If the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is signed and put in place, I think this would be the biggest U.S. economic announcement since Nixon in 71. What do I mean by that? Well, the U.S. made an economic announcement in 1933. What was it? We're taking all your stuff. The U.S. made an economic announcement in 71. What was it? We're divorcing ourselves from the gold standard so we can print money and inflate your life away. The U.S. made an economic announcement in 08. What was it? We're bailing out poor behavior and we're taking the side of the banks. If the U.S. makes an economic announcement in 2025, what is it? It's we're pro-growth. Generally appreciate is the game theory. Historically, you're much better on Bitcoin's team than trying to fight against it. And that's very important, is that the United States is much better off benefiting from this technology in various ways than trying to stand in its way. So I do expect this new administration to continue to be pro-Bitcoin and buy some because it's in their best interest to do so.
So is that what's going to take Bitcoin to $1 million if that starts happening? If these analysts and you're correct, and it starts happening early next year?
Yeah, it very well could. Absolutely. I mean, my predictions, again, are grounded in the fundamentals. You can't print any more of this thing. So the more demand and the more people that want it, the price has to go up. And I think the price is justified to go up because it's better at storing wealth and protecting your future than all other financial assets or just general assets you can own, like real estate or a basket of equities. So yeah, absolutely. You can consider my prediction as simple as this. I think there will be more demand next year for Bitcoin than there is right now. And I think that demand will take it way higher. $1 million's not impossible.
Yeah, Jackie, we've been talking all about these hypotheticals the entire show, but I mean, we know that there's a lot of unknowns. Give me and the audience,
the customer Saylor serves, then MicroStrategy. Why? What Saylor's selling you is 150%, 200% exposure to Bitcoin. He's selling you levered Bitcoin. He's selling you overexposed, hyper volatile Bitcoin in the sense that when Bitcoin goes up, MicroStrategy goes up even more. Mm-hmm. If Microsoft buys a little bit of Bitcoin, their stock is going to be 2% Bitcoin, 98% Microsoft operating company. And yes, that to me is a more interesting stock than it is today. That to me is a more performant stock than the one today. That to me is a more capitalized stock for the future than it is today. But is that a MicroStrategy competitor? I don't think so. So what's unique about Michael Saylor is he had an operating company that he thought was going to fail, that he thought was going to be worth zero. So he was willing to bet the house. Microsoft, Facebook, Google, these companies are not going to bet the house. They don't need to. They have successful operating companies. And so I think Saylor has won a market of his own. I think he has a massive first mover advantage. I don't see anyone directly competing with the products that he offers. What I do think is he's caved away for others to follow, and that, hey, owning Bitcoin on your balance sheet is acceptable. The public markets actually understand it. They value it. They're not going to short sell and leave you for it.